Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks to all for who are joining today. We're going to kick off. We know that folks will sort of come in and leave as needed, given that it's midday. But this is another webinar for Society for Applied Anthropology related to an NSF grant we received around AI workforce sort of development and kind of capacity building. This is the first webinar after the annual meeting that was um, in Albuquerque. And this one is on sort of careers and career transitions, if you will. And intentionally, this isn't just a conversation about folks who like work in big tech or something like that, though Larry does, but it's really much more broader. And the thought here in framing this out is that arguably, there would be people who disagree, but arguably, I would at least say that AI is already impacting everything from the hiring process to what maybe early stage career pipelines look like, and to sort of the work practice across the board of people, regardless of seniority, in all fields and all types of organizations. Some are much more advanced than others, some are much less, obviously. And within each organization, there are some people who are really doing a lot of stuff, and there are some people who are doing less in terms of using these tools to advance in organizations. But nevertheless, at least in my experience and talking with people, I see a lot of impact already. And so what we have today is a group of folks who have spent years kind of coaching, presenting on the topic of sort of career transitions and career prep in various capacities, from like providing coaching services to various webinars for different groups within the anthropology area to events at conferences. And so, we come from, or the speakers, which I'll announce in a second, come from, a host of backgrounds. And so we're trying to intentionally sort of paint this broader picture, not just have a conversation about big tech. And maybe one today that's not even like super technical in terms of AI, but really thinking about the broader impacts of all of this in terms of, again, this sort of career pipeline, and trying to, importantly, I guess, coach folks to figure this out. And that's coach folks, maybe earlier stage people, individuals to make the career transition. Maybe that's sort of, even early to mid who want to change what they're doing or adapt, as well as, late stage career who maybe are having to adapt to new technology that, is completely new and disrupting maybe to historical practices. So that's what we're trying to do today. And so we have Jennifer Studebaker, um, Suanna Crowley, and Larry McGrath, and I will let them actually all introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them. But Jennifer, you want to take it away?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Studebaker. So I've got three different hats that I wear. I am currently the executive director at the Women, Food, and Agriculture Network, which is a nonprofit focused on supporting women becoming leaders in the agricultural and food system space. Also, I have my own consulting company, a Studebaker Consulting LLC, which really focuses more on process design and consumer research. And I am also one of the co-chairs of the Anthropology Career Readiness Network. And I'm one of the facilitators as well as a part of that work that goes out and visits university as a part of our departmental advisory initiative. So I'll pass it to Larry. Does that sound good?
Big tech is where I do my research, and that's what makes me money. Outside of that, I also run a consultancy that you can find on my website, larrysmcgrath.com, that advocates for the value of the humanities and social sciences beyond the walls of ivory towers and into civil society, especially in business. The catch is that I, like most anthropologists, went to grad school in order to become an anthropologist and not to go into business. But when I got my doctorate from Johns Hopkins back in 2014, I quickly realized, for reasons that we're going to discuss during this session, that business is where I'd rather be. Looks like, Suanna, you're up next.
Thank you so much. So I'm Suanna Crowley. I am a principal investigator at a national environmental consulting firm, SWCA. That is my day job. Like Jennifer, I have a couple of different hats. I'm also an entrepreneur and somebody who has established their own consulting company, consulting practice, and that is something that focuses on science communication, fundraising, public advocacy, and nonprofit administration. But I also come to you today as the, excuse me, president of the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology. This is a section of SAAA and a partner of SfAA and a partner of the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, which I also support. And I'm somebody who has hit a number of pivot points in their career, the first being trying to conduct research right before 9/11, thinking I was going to be an archaeologist working in the Middle East and having to pivot after that. And then my PhD finished in 2007, right at the start of the Great Recession. So I'm actually in my third phase pivot learning with AI, and I'm excited to talk to everyone today. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks all. So, again, the title of this, which I suppose I didn't formally say, is, sort of really framed around preparing, right, for careers, right, in the sort of age of AI. So not in AI proper, right? Again, not in big tech, but where I'd like to sort of start is sort of taking stock of where everybody's at, how it's already sort of impacting you in one way or another, right? That could be it could be just using a chatbot to sort of support some things. It could be building products, whatever it is, maybe, a few minutes each. Larry, you want to start?
AI has effects throughout the research life cycle. Let's break that down into 5 phases of my work as a senior researcher at Amazon. In the first, we prepare a research brief and protocol, and oftentimes that takes place with a RAG depository of prior research that my team has assembled, and I draw upon that to ask questions and identify lacuna in our approach. That's effectively the literature review that AI helps automate. In the second phase, when we identify our methods and gather stakeholders around the table and present a brief, I oftentimes draft that document in dialogue with a synthetic text generator like Claude or Gemini to help refine my prose. In the third, when it comes to actually participating in the field and doing research, I think the practice of meticulous participant observation, taking notes, is one that's relatively unaffected by AI. I'm still old school and use a pen and paper. But in the fourth phase, when it comes to coding all of those observations, I think that there are AI programs that are really good at pattern recognition. In the fifth, writing a final document, advocating for the impact of our research on product development at Amazon is again where AI platforms, especially chat platforms for the sake of argument refinement, and Canvas-based platforms such as FigJam for brainstorming and frameworking. My arguments are really effective partners in conversation to produce well-refined documents.
Thanks, Larry. Suanna?
There we go. So as an archaeologist working inside of a cultural resources management team, I use AI tools and AI platforms in a couple of different ways. Certainly, one of the big parts, as Larry kind of references, that literature review. Most of the work products that I develop for clients have some component of a background research element to it. Lit review, comparable sites, other kinds of environmental context analyses. And so AI tools, particularly Microsoft Copilot, are ones that I deploy to be able to gather up, put my arms around the site history and the contextual situation for a project area, for a client, et cetera. Another way that I really have started to use AI tools is within the business development kind of tasks that I take on. So proposal writing in particular, in looking at ways that my organization can meet a request for proposal a little bit better, gathering up better comparable kinds of projects that answer specific questions that are part of an RFP makes the proposal a little bit better aligned. Certainly, it's great for tuning up the prose and being able to reach that review audience a little bit better for different kinds of private and public clients. That dovetails into the report deliverables, the technical writing. I'll use AI to really examine, the prose, make sure that my citations are correct. This is an endless process. We have fabulous technical editors, but it's nice to be able to deliver something before they have to dive in and have it a little bit cleaner, a little bit QC quality controlled before it gets there. The last piece that we're really starting to use it for in environmental and cultural resource management has to do with that data collection and data analytics part. And in this, we're really looking at a lot of spatial data. So how AI agents or AI queries, AI tools can be used to analyze maps, do predictive modeling, help us refine the analytics on deep testing. And these are, key parts of the deliverables that will go out to individual clients, are reported out to municipal agencies, and then in many cases are delivered to stakeholders such as tribal nations or descendant communities. And so those AI tools are really helping us deliver a little bit faster, deliver a little bit cleaner, and be more on point as we produce the kinds of documents and deliverables that are required of us.
Jennifer.
All right, so I'm kind of an outlier, but first I'll preface. So, previous to my current role, I worked at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, and I was a member of their technology team. So, I was actually a part of a working group that was looking at rolling out AI within the foundation. And one of the big questions we had as we were doing that work was around issues of privacy, and how to make sure that the data and the conversations that we were having were, not in a position where we could expose ourselves from a legal sense. And there, I did do a little deep dive and educated myself around AI. So I would like to distinguish between generative AI and AI as a general field. So I will say I do benefit from a lot of AI features, thinking about in Zoom, how you can have the transcriptions and auto captions. I find that really helpful and useful. And I'll say in Canva too, you can have the little make it look like a watercolor button. I'm pretty sure that's probably some type of AI there. Um, but I'll add in terms of the work that I'm doing currently, I am definitely a little more of an AI resistor when it comes to generative AI. And that's because I work in the nonprofit sector, predominantly with farmers that are really concerned about sustainability and the environment. And right now there's a crisis around land access, which the building of data centers has created a lot of challenges in terms of retaining access to farmland, as well as the issues around water access, especially as we're seeing shifting weather patterns, and some areas are facing pretty severe drought, which is impacting their ability to grow. So I'll say I'm definitely a little bit of a resistor, but I also recognize that there's a lot of things that I use on a daily basis where AI is integrated, and it doesn't always register to as AI. One thing I will say that has definitely had an impact on our work is because I am running a nonprofit, we get a lot of our funding through grants. And I have definitely seen an uptick in the number of applications that are being submitted for certain grants. And I know there's kind of probably two factors going on here. One is the significant cuts at the federal level for a lot of nonprofit programs, which is meaning a lot of people are going to having to shift over and focus on more private foundations and alternative sources of funding to maintain their programming. But I also think the use of generative AI in producing proposals has probably made it a little faster for people to be able to apply for those grants at a higher volume. So we've had some where, I think they're going to award 10 grants and they got, 500 applications. So it's definitely challenging to stick out in that type of environment, which is, I think we'll probably get to this. A lot of the work that I do is really relational. So it's really focusing on building relationships with individuals so that when I'm applying for a grant, they know who I am and they're looking out for it. So
Thanks.
that's kind of my
For
piece.
one quick question there, in the applications you see, are they also all, well, maybe not all, but do you think the quality of them is better than maybe in the past?
Um, I think there's probably some variation there. I was visiting a university last week, and I think a couple of the professors mentioned that usually the AI generated papers are more of like a B quality. So I think there's probably some people who are already writing it a C and then they're getting leveled up. But I'm somebody who's generally pretty confident in my writing, and usually I'm starting with my budget, which I'm not going to automate that when I'm thinking about my grants and how I'm doing that work. And I approach it from a project management standpoint of like thinking about what's achievable. And we're also a small nonprofit, so I'm very wary of overcommitting when it comes to certain work we do. But I recognize in other contexts where you have a much larger staff, the whoever's doing that development role has maybe a little more leeway to stretch where they can go. So for me, I need to have like a really close attention to detail in terms of making sure whatever we're promising we can actually deliver on. But yeah, I'm not usually reviewing the proposals too, so I haven't seen too much in terms of the quality. But yeah, I did hire for several roles recently and specified that I would like people to not use generative AI when producing their applications, but I also in turn promised that a human would read every single application, which I did. So I also recognize in larger contexts too, that's not feasible in terms of having a person physically review every single application.
Yeah, thanks. One of the reasons for my question there is, Larry, and so I know we're sort of saying about, improving prose and such things. And, there's people who obviously would debate that. There's some people who think this technology is awful and should just kind of be put in a can, in a bottle and shipped back away. But I would make the argument that there's a lot of opportunity for sort of improving, clarity and impact. But without maybe going down that rabbit hole for the moment, I guess, Jennifer, picking up where you left off, you were talking about you were just hiring. Again, I know most of you talk to, or all of you talk to folks who are looking for roles, whether that's, anthropologists, or even broader than that in some cases. And so I guess, what I'd like to know next, again, in sort of the current moment is what are you seeing when you sort of talk to people, present with, interact, uh, or hire, whatever it may be, in your organizations about, what's happening with AI. That could be you're seeing more resumes written by AI. You're seeing tools that are being, resumes are being reviewed by AI. Are you noticing anything? Are you coaching people on anything? Suanna, you want to start?
Sure thing. So yes, I do actually spend a lot of time, we call it office hours in my house, where I'm setting aside time to talk to folks as a coach. And largely that is coaching them through the process of preparing for the job search or being in the middle of the job search. And that includes early stage folks as well as people who are pivoting away from tenured jobs or, more senior positions in other fields and particularly interested in coming into cultural resource management. Um, Definitely, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of concern, fear, panic. The tools that are the front door for a lot of organizations are very AI enabled, and anyone who's gone through a hire view or similar kind of interview process, sort of a chatbot interview process, kind of walks away feeling a little shattered. You all know that I have a 20-year-old who is a college student who is bumping up against these systems all the time. And, we're trying to optimize for them as well as, do that coaching, therapy, calming effect that it kind of has on candidates who, feel a great deal of uncertainty being injected into the process. This is unlike anything any of us have encountered. So, coaching through the good steps, the discernment that you as a human have in applying, go back to your roots as anthropologists, do that textual analysis on the position description, do a comparative analysis across, the job roles that you're seeing, and learn from it. Take away something about what the titles are actually called, what the responsibilities are realistically. And AI tools can help you do some of that analysis and map your skill set against those job descriptions, no matter what stage you are in your career or what sort of part of the process you are in the job application cycle. I think the reality that Jennifer mentioned of processing those credential materials. A lot of large organizations like mine do have that portal. They sift, as an archaeologist, I understand the sifting process. This is a sifting process through these candidates. But I do try to emphasize that human touch, that relationship building piece. I've been working with the DAI through the Anthro Readiness Network and independently with other organizations, trying to emphasize to these early career folks that is, build those soft skills, build, those networks, try the cold email, and, reach out, be proactive, be receptive to the advice, and keep that, gratitude practice. Please write the thank you note after you've taken half an hour of somebody's time for an informational interview. I've had two this week, and neither of those candidates, here we are, Friday, 12:30, have bothered to shoot the thank you email. Please try to remember to do that because it's going to create, a good virtuous cycle and a relationship that you can call back on a little bit later. But definitely I'm seeing panic. I'm seeing panic at the parent level. I'm seeing panic at that early career level for students. And I'm seeing a lot of concern for people who are coming out of the academy and trying to shift their skill sets toward nonprofit, government, and business settings as well.
Thanks. Larry, you want to jump in?
AI literacy is an expectation at Amazon when it comes to interviewing any applicants. In fact, those of us who interview candidates are expected to take an AI literacy module. However, that is nothing like comprehension of AI's inner workings, whether that be natural language processing, much less neural nets. Literacy instead depends on skills that well preceded generative AI. Let me lay out three. The first is the skill of prioritization. It's an expectation that candidates are able to segment low, medium, and high complexity tasks in their work stream in order to identify those mundane rote activities that ought to be automated by AI systems. The history of technology, after all, tends to automate mediocrity first, and I think that's the current state with most AI systems. The second is data hygiene. There's an expectation that the data we feed as input into whatever AI platform it might be is scrubbed of personally identifiable information, intellectual property, and so forth. One need not be a generative AI coder, much less machine learning whiz, in order to perform that. The third area is demonstrating a competence to identify where the human should be in the loop. Knowing those points of human decision making to insert in a workflow where AI is being used. Again, that's about knowing the appropriate use cases for AI in human decision making and not the inner mechanics of the system.
Thanks. And Jennifer?
Yeah. One of the things I always advise students or early career professionals to think about is the audience when they're applying for a job. So when you go on LinkedIn or wherever you're finding your job posts, a lot of times if you're going in and you're submitting your application through a portal like Bamboo HR or Workday, I think you can generally assume that there's going to be an ATS system. So it's an applicant tracking system scanning your resume and pulling from the keywords that are there. And I think it's important in that case. And I do think that's one scenario where maybe using AI to, make sure you're passing those trackers could be a potential use there. But I'll say as somebody that's worked kind of on and off in the nonprofit world. If when you're applying for a job, it's somebody's email that you're sending your application materials to, I think you have a lot more leeway in terms of the format of your resume. So usually ATS compliant resumes, you want to avoid columns. You want to try and not do too much fancy formatting. Whereas, if you're directly emailing somebody a PDF of your resume, I think you can get a little more creative there. And I will also emphasize this is not true for all fields. Like big tech, usually you can get away without not writing a cover letter a lot of the times. But in the nonprofit sector, I would really encourage you to write a cover letter because it's really about you as a person and how you're going to fit within that organization. So we do have a couple tools from ACRN that I want to just drop in the chat for you to have as resources. One is our Translating Anthropology Skills for the Workplace tool. So this is how you take some of the jargon that we use as the anthropologists in doing our work and translate it into terms that employers will be more likely to recognize, while also sharing about why that skill is important and matters. Also, we have one that's specifically on analyzing job descriptions. And that's helpful because, yeah, to Suanna's point, you kind of want to treat this like field work where you're going to closely read through the job description. It's also always good to go on LinkedIn and see if you can figure out who the hiring manager is and if you're connected in any way. And if you are able to find them, maybe just shooting them a quick note, either saying, hey, I saw this job, I'm really excited, I'm going to be applying, or it could even be asking a question about the application, something for clarification. So I'll add, I don't have a PhD, and I was applying for a job here in Kansas City with an organization that the role was around, I think, risk management or something. And it was specifically asking for a PhD or additional experience. So in that case, I kind of use that as the excuse to reach out to the employer, the hiring manager, to say, hey, I'm really interested in this role. However, I only got a master's, but here's all the other experience that I have. And I actually ended up getting an interview, I think, because I had done that initial sort of outreach and touch. The other tool I want to share with you is our networking and informational interviews tool. So I think one of the big challenges we've got right now is when you're going on to a lot of these large job aggregator websites. Sometimes they're ghost jobs, sometimes they've already been filled. And the way I think you can get around making sure when you're taking the time to apply for a job that there's actually a job at the other end is through networking and conducting some of these informational interviews. And once you've connected with those people, also connecting with them on LinkedIn so you can see when they post jobs in your feed, not within the jobs section of the website. Because you're going to have a lot easier time making it through that system where, yeah, there's thousands of applicants. But if you've got someone on the other end that says, oh, I'm waiting for Jennifer to apply for this job. Can you go make sure her resume is in my pile? That's a way to kind of get ahead of some of these systems. Because I've heard stories about where the ATS system immediately kicked somebody out of the queue, but they had a hiring manager that was watching for them that went out of their way to say, no, go get them out of that stack. I want them over here because I'm planning on interviewing them for the role.
Thanks. So building on the resources, I might maybe want to pivot here a bit. We got a little bit of an overview of where things are at. And of course, it's much more complex than we could cover in that bit of time. But I think there's a question now of how do you articulate your value, especially, against the backdrop of AI, where, there are organizations that, right, are requiring AI literacy to the point of Larry. And, certainly I'm going to presume that an org like Amazon is, fairly far along on their journey compared to some smaller organizations. Right? And so, how are you yourselves, maybe in your orgs or coaching others about how you articulate your value, as an anthropologist against the backdrop of AI, appreciating that many organizations want to use AI for insights work, or research, let's just say broadly. So, Annie, you want to start?
Sure thing. That articulation of value is something that the first in sort of starting out, to all of those who are attending today and listening, I would highly encourage practice. Start practicing, start experimenting with how you're describing your value, your skill sets, your results to the outside world. Some of you who've maybe heard me speak before, you know the story of me going to this holiday party with my husband, who's an MIT alumni. And over the last 20 years, I have experimented on this group of party attendees, unbeknownst to them, on how I explain myself to this population of, you know, very skilled business people. And from that practice, I've really learned what resonates as I try out new words, as I try out new titles, as I try out new descriptions of what it is that I do. So giving yourself some practice, giving yourself experimental mindset on developing that as a muscle, explaining your value to those different audiences that Jennifer was mentioning is absolutely worth your time. Parties, grocery store lines, conversations on Zoom, as you have a chance, I highly recommend. The other thing that I would say is, you know, as you start to think about your value, that textual analysis, as you go into the reading of job description, position descriptions is very valuable. As I work with the folks that are my direct reports, we make time to walk them. I walk them through looking at position descriptions. My summer interns, as we do a closeout interview at the end of the summer, I actually have them open up with me and sit with me and look at what the next job looks like. If they were to come back to my company and apply, let's walk through that and learn from it and start to talk about connecting what you did this summer to what that job role that you'd like to apply for in the future, how that connects. And those are the first two things. The third thing I would say is anthropologists as a whole are kind of really good solo artists. We're really good as individual contributors. We're trained that way, particularly as we move through our graduate programs. But the world of work in many of these spaces, applied spaces, is very team-based. And these are teams full of skilled people with busy schedules. And so my advice really is don't bury the lead. Learn to put those, you know, achievements slash results out in front. Start to construct sentences that, you know, really describe in, you know, brief but succinct and impactful terms what you bring to the table, as you embed those messages with the value that anthropology, your training, and your experience actually bring.
Jennifer, you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really important to develop a succinct pitch. So we do have a tool around developing your elevator pitch. But as I was launching my consulting company, I did do a lot of networking events where, you know, at first I tried to say, oh, I did like business consulting. And then I learned if I said I'm a business anthropologist, they get like, it's like a little bit of a hook where they're like, what's that? And then I could say, oh, I help you understand your customers. Where like you need to have a really clear line of like what the value is for them in terms of the work that you can do. And I think for anthropologists, a lot of us do face challenges in, yeah, how do we articulate the value of anthropology? So we do have another tool here around explaining anthropology to people in your life. But I think for me, I think the value that we really add is that kind of systems perspective. We're able to see the context because I think that's one thing that we can, you know, kind of get over on the AI because AI only knows what you tell it. So being able to kind of connect the dots and see relationships between potential things where you could work together. So a lot of the work I do in my current role is through partnerships. So I'm always kind of thinking about, okay, where can we plug in and support each other in terms of the work we're doing? That's kind of like the value add there in terms of really seeing the big picture and how the pieces connect.
Thanks. Larry?
The methods that we learn in grad school still confer value well beyond academia. Participant observation, structural interpretation, thick description. And I understood the question, Matt, to be how we articulate our value, especially with an eye to AI. If all of those three methods I mentioned are tools in our ethnographic kit, treating AI as one tool alongside others demonstrates our value, especially by decaffeinating the significance of AI, showing that it's a mundane part of our toolkit and is not an end in itself. The end, whose value we need to articulate, is our impact on an organization, on a service execution, on a product development. I think that all remains the same. I'll make this other remark specifically for articulating value on the part of recent anthropology graduates and those whom I advise. It is to write not just with prose. We write our dissertations, we write our articles and our books primarily in the form of dense paragraphs. And in addition to that, value is established in a company by creating deliverables that take other forms than a monograph, such as heuristics, models, frameworks, checklists, and translating the insights that you've already generated via participant observation, structural analysis, and thick description into some of those alternative formats, I think will communicate value more effectively, especially in an interview.
Thanks. And so I want to come right back to you. So I heard you describe it as, one skill of many. And I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks. So what would you think if today you were seeing an applicant who in some way was not signaling to, their understanding and ability to sort of use AI as a new tool in the toolkit?
I'd
Uh,
ask them, how do you use AI as one tool in your toolkit?
Would you expect, like, are you expecting to see it though? Like if somebody was, say, resisting, because that's maybe like their purview of or their perspective of the technology, would you find that challenging? Would you potentially overlook that applicant? Like, today, do you expect to see it?
Yeah, resistance, I mean, was that's a reason not to hire the candidate just as much as resisting email would be a reason to resist not to not hire the candidate. But I take your point, and to be less tongue in cheek, it's worth signaling, though always as a means. I think that hyper signaling by treating the use of AI as the upshot of our work is also a way to get disregarded in an interview cycle.
Okay, thanks. Suanna?
I was going to say something similar. Uh, Archaeologists are somewhat hesitant to approach these tools. Some of my own team members are nervously moving toward these tools and their functionality. Hesitant partly to do that upskilling, also uncertain about what that means for their jobs and the outcome of the work that they do. Uh, I'm just a little surprised at the number of students that I encounter, either through my formal work or my coaching work, who are expressing that hesitancy. I make the assumption that they're younger and much more skilled than I am in these digital spaces. How can that be? But I think with a little bit of a reassurance and certainly that management or supervision to call upon their embedded talents, to think about anthropology in these, how anthropology can, improve what we're doing, push these tools to be, a little bit more productive. Um, that with that kind of coaching, I'm noticing people are moving toward it. But it is, one of those processes, I think, that a lot of applied anthropologists who are looking in that, exiting undergraduate, exiting graduate space are really trying to think about. I worked with a group at a university here in New England last week, and the graduate students in one of the programs were part of a master's program, but it was not a thesis program. There was no capstone, there was no endpoint, there was no deliverable. And I was encouraging them to think about, create the deliverables that they want to see, create the portfolio pieces that they feel are important for their work. If they're in policy, let's write some policy statements or op-eds. If it's with respect to fundraising, development, and philanthropy, case studies, case for support statements, grant documents. Start to think about the way that they can, bounce ideas and use AI tools that are at their fingertips within the university to iterate, use it as a sounding board, and start to think about what they need as they exit their programs. And use this experimental moment to get over some of that hesitancy and do a little bit of that production of a portfolio that they can also take into the hiring process as demonstration of their capacity and value.
And Jennifer, I'm curious to hear, like, if you want to respond exactly to that question as it was, go for it. But also, seeing as you described yourself as slightly more resistant, I guess I would even ask you, like, how do you feel about seeing resumes in that space? And, is there an opportunity, like, if somebody brought those skills in a way that maybe you didn't think they fit into the org, but maybe you see value there, like, how would you feel about that?
Um, I think it really depends on, the role in the organization. And I'll add that most of the work that we do at WFAN, I don't see a strong use case for AI. In terms of the type of work that we do, because so much of it is relational. And I, as a hiring manager, I wouldn't throw someone out of the stack because they have AI skills. But I think for me, I'm much more concerned about whether they have the problem solving abilities to figure things out, and also the communication skills to be able to articulate themselves consistently. Because I would be concerned if somebody needed to use AI to write all their emails. Like, I want somebody that knows how to write clearly, that knows how to communicate with different audiences without having to pause and go ask something to help them translate it. For me, I'm really much more interested in their ability to figure things out. Because one of the things that I've seen is sometimes a leaning into, like, sort of learned helplessness, where you've kind of developed a crutch in terms of going to certain places, or saying, oh, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to try. Whereas I really want people to, before we had ChatGPT to ask, you could go Google it. And I'm somebody that I've learned how to do a lot of things just by Googling it and thanking whoever in that forum on the Microsoft page solved my problem for me. Whereas now I guess you could ask Copilot. So it's sometimes it's the same difference in terms of, the use of those tools and that technology. And I think one thing to say with AI too is it's a technology. It's kind of agnostic either way. It's really how you use it. But I think for me, I think when you're working with large data sets and kind of like complex information, I can see a use case for it. But I think, when it's kind of the advice I give when you're doing research, I'm not going to survey a company of 5 people. That's not going to be a useful approach, instead of sitting down and just doing interviews with each of those 5 people in terms of how they do their work and how they're enjoying their work experience. So I think it's really thinking about, like, what tools are appropriate for the problem you're trying to solve.
Jennifer makes a good point, if I may add,
Yeah, please.
that a negative signal is that AI would be used as a crutch. And we certainly don't want it to replace key skills, all of which Jennifer, you mentioned. And something that we do look out for at Amazon when applicants apply is whether they treat AI tools as information generators. Because if that's the case, then they aren't effectively using the tool. What we want to see, perhaps, as you shift away from the AI tool use and instead the motivating problems underlying its use, we want to see whether applicants are aware of the processes that they want automated. And perhaps even in relationship building, there are a lot of functions, whether it's boilerplate generation, summarization of correspondence, maybe sharing contracts, that could be automated in order to make space for higher stakes decisions. And that's what's worth signaling.
Thanks. Now, I'm going to ask a question, and this may not apply to your organizations, and I'm not even asking you to respond about what's happening in your organization, but I suspect you all have heard, at least somewhere in the media, and Mitch just put a question that sort of signals this slightly, that a lot of employees are being asked to use these tools, and there's even a degree to which some organizations are tying it to what you see, like on a performance review and incentives, et cetera, right? And there could be pressure to use these tools that may be, in place of some of what we do, potentially in sort of research and insights. And so how, if anybody is in that position, do you have any thoughts again on how you would guide them? Of course, I know we can always come back to our sort of hallmark skills, but any thoughts? Have you been coaching anybody through that? So I know
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So, as an archaeologist, we see other threats and other pressures kind of on the horizon, at federal levels, at the triggers for the kind of work that we do inside of cultural resource management. Um, we don't obviously see any replacement for the manual labor component of archaeology. That is a skill set, a set of discernment tools that we carry with us as we work in the field, that we don't see a lot of automation occurring around. Certainly, I think there are ways that we'd like to, collect data better, faster through some of these tools, and make it more consistent. There's definitely experimentation inside of my company on that end. Um, but yeah, the replacement part, we're not hesitant about yet. I think functionalities, internally, the technical writing side, that data collection, things of that nature. Um, Other spaces where I work, though, I think it is, kind of a bigger issue, as I do a little bit of consulting in science communication, in the fundraising that Jennifer was talking about, and in advocacy. Some of that, being able to generate boilerplate, and, move or specify pieces of text toward different audiences, develop audience profiles, develop different kinds of evaluation tools for the effectiveness of grant programs or media campaigns, using some of the onboard tools or creating your own. I do see some of that, and I see, people having to, as I coach students who are coming out of graduate programs, they feel like even undergraduates are having to move into spaces more like middle managers. They have to have more embedded skills, a greater portfolio of experiences as they enter those spaces. And there is a little bit of that sort of, mid-tier, those mid-tier roles where some of these factors, AI replacement, are beginning to make people worry, in real ways.
anybody else want to weigh in on that or?
I understand if I was listening correctly about suggested tool use, about managers or organizations that are promoting the use of certain AI products in your work stream. If I were a builder and it was advised that I use a Phillips head screwdriver, I shouldn't respond to that by saying, no, I don't want to use a screwdriver. I would suggest that perhaps a flathead screwdriver is more appropriate in order to drill this nail. And so mere resistance in and of itself is not going to go anywhere. What matters is proposing an alternative tool. It's really key when preparing for job interviews to familiarize yourself with the mundane details of work life. Too often, recent graduates focus on the brilliance of their ideas or the novelty of their thesis. What's important as well is the roles of other people on a team, the structure of that organization, and crucially, the tools that are used within the organization. And if one tool is advocated and you don't think it's a good one, then you better propose an alternative tool in response.
Thanks. And Jennifer, anything you want to weigh in on or?
I would say so. I know there are cases, yeah, where like in performance reviews where you're expected to use, say, ChatGPT, the in-house, company version, X number of hours, and they're tracking that, and that you're expected to be using that tool, which I'm sure it's the higher ups wanting to make sure that the money they spent on it is getting quote made back. But I would buddy up with your tech team and see what level of visibility they actually have in terms of the queries you're doing. So if you've just got to be using it once a day, you can ask it, hey, tell me a fun story. What should I make for dinner? It doesn't, if they don't have visibility to what the queries are, I would say if it's not helping you in your work, I think it really depends on the job because there are certain jobs where I don't see a lot of value add in terms of going over and asking for assistance. If you're doing something that's like data entry or, you're just scheduling hotel appointments, whatever you're trying to do, it's really if it's proportional to your job and it makes sense. But I do know that there's some companies where there's just blanket demands where we're all going to use this, you're all going to like it. And I'll say it's somebody that's done a lot of software adoption work. A lot of those types of rollouts fail because they haven't shown a clear use case for the people that are on the other end. They're expected to be the users. So I would say for those that are looking to roll out AI in their companies to really think about what are the specific uses for certain types of roles. Because I did a lot of work around Salesforce adoption when I was at the Kauffman Foundation. And one of the big challenges we had is there were certain jobs where, like in my case, I didn't talk to anybody outside the building. So in terms of me tracking my contacts, it wasn't really a strong benefit, but I was also the one having to train everybody on how to use it. So I think it's really thinking about when you're trying to introduce new technology is thinking about who are the end users here too, and why would they want to use this?
Yeah, thanks. And Mitch commented again of tracking of employees, and I have heard a lot of it. And there's a lot of reports of these things. I can't say that that impacts me, and I'm not saying it impacts any of you directly, but it's something that I know some people are at least being challenged by and wondering how to respond. So thank you for sort of trying to weigh in on that as best as possible.
That's
Now,
Matt,
dreadful. That's a, oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
please.
I was just going to say that I wanted to bounce off something you said, Larry, and that was that proposed solutions muscle, that particularly for, early career folks, this is, a wonderful moment to, demonstrate that energy and enthusiasm that
Mm.
you have in the new role. It's not just your skill set, but the energy that you are able to bring to it and that problem-solving mindset, willingness. There is resistance, pockets of resistance everywhere for these tools and what they may bring. But there's another level of communication that I think Larry's getting at about that, there's a positioning of your energy and your problem solving, your awareness for those, ability to that prioritization you were talking about, Larry, a little bit earlier. And encouraging, I kind of think of it as that experimental mindset, walking into new spaces, new jobs, with some of that innovative mindset, kind of as part of your operating system as you enter these spaces.
Yeah, it's a nice, eloquent formulation. Thank you. What I also heard Jennifer saying is that there are better forms of resistance, perhaps, than outright non-use. I mean, one of my favorite anthropologists, David Graeber, if it's a bullshit job and a bullshit ask, then just pile it on and use up the tokens necessary to meet your quota.
So let me, uh, I'm trying to not influence, the discussion, but let me maybe relate it to something that, is a theme I often write about, which is kind of being more generative. And I don't mean generative AI, right? But it's directly tied to what you're all saying. And so if it goes beyond critique and it's kind of critique and also what else, right? Yeah, whether it's critique, whether it's resistance, right? It's one thing, those are often important in various ways, but it's a question of where do we go from there, right? And to be able to do that, though, right? To be able to suggest alternatives, to be able to suggest how do you actually solve a problem, it does also presume, right, that you have enough knowledge to do that, right? Which means you yourselves have to be skilled enough, right, and schooled enough kind of in the space. And so I'm curious to know kind of how you're staying abreast of all of this. But I just want to give sort of one more point here, which is over the past particularly year when like showing up at conferences, particularly anthropology conferences, I'm hearing a lot of critiques of like this space that are sort of critiques of like 2-ish years ago at this point in time. And it sort of demonstrates to me that people aren't keeping up, right, and really understanding the space very well. talking about like the large scale energy usage when energy, time to compute, say if generative AI is dropped by 200% in 2 years, things of that nature, right? So I feel, not everybody, but I feel many sort of need to keep learning in this space. It's changing a lot, right? And if you want to stay current, be able to sort of recommend the best sort of alternatives, find the best way to resist, you sort of need to really know the space. So, all that said, I'm very curious to know what you're all doing to sort of stay on top of things at the moment, stay relevant, stay current in this one particular skill or task, right? Which doesn't displace anything else, but it is something that is asked for and sought for. So anybody whoever wants to jump in, I'm curious to know, like, what are you doing to learn, stay current in a very rapidly changing sort of landscape of AI? Anybody want to go first?
I write about it.
In what?
I think there's a good anthology right there behind you, Matt. I mean, look, this is an audience of people who are in graduate school or were in graduate school for an anthropology degree. That means at some level you enjoy publishing and you like writing and contributing to the conversation that is publication. I find that to be a motivator in my life, in my productivity. It's certainly what motivated me to go to graduate school, and it's what continues to motivate me to keep a foot in the academic realm where I can contribute to that conversation. And so, if that's the fire that lights the right parts of your body in order to actually experiment with these products, write about them.
Thank you. Anyone else want to, Suanna?
I was just going to echo that and say, as you know, the middle-aged woman on the panel, it's really been a great amplifier for me. It's absolutely a challenge in many respects. I try to keep myself current on lots of different technologies. I'm married into a marriage where the one of us is he's a tech bro. I'm just going to say it. He's a tech bro, and also a specific kind of finance bro under the tech bro heading. So we talk a lot about technology. I also have a college student and an upcoming high school student. And so I'm trying to keep up with them, and the tools that they're learning how to use and innovate. I'm somebody who's got to manage folks who are, in more detailed and deep spaces with some of the production of the deliverables that I create as a manager. I'm not always out in the field, so I'm trying to help them get better at the data collection and the technical writing and things of that nature. So I am part of a co-pilot cohort, getting my co-pilot's license, which has been very exciting over the last several weeks. I challenged myself to, go into new spaces like the Claude AI and ChatGPT. What am I learning there? How am I interacting with it? I'm, trying to just get the hang of the prompt engineering and going back and forth with myself, learning how that works. But I'm also, started timidly moving toward that creator function. I've had a lot of experience doing video and conferences and being a creator in those spaces, but learning that creation tool that Larry was talking about, how as an applied anthropologist, I was one of those people that was said, they said very explicitly, thanks, but we're not going to invite you into academia. Go along and be about your way and in some other mode of working. I still feel that calling, that pull to contribute in those conversations. And for a long time, I've held off on the sidelines. I've ghostwritten for a ton of people, but I haven't put my name on it. And now I'm starting to put my name on it because that 40 to 50 hour work a week, job, now I've got tools that are making this part of my creative process go a little bit faster. And I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing, so that I'm experimenting on myself and I'm experimenting as I go with these new tools to see how far I can get.
All right, I know you're excited for my answer, Matt.
All views are welcome.
Yeah, as the resistor here, I think for me, it's not something that I see a lot of value in spending time on because I think for the work that I do, it really is about that relationship piece where I need to get outside, listen to people, hear about where they're getting their information too. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, because we do a lot of communications-based work, is ways to kind of go a little more analog in terms of reaching people because I think there's a lot of overwhelm when it comes to technology. So I know we've got decent open rates on our emails, but I think, having that flyer that comes to you in the mail actually might get people's attention a little more now. So I think there are some things like direct mail where they might have a little bit of resurgence as people are wanting something physical in front of them that they can touch. And I'll add, I do stay up to date, through reading news and all of that. And I'll add with when it comes to the environmental impacts, that's great to hear that we've managed to reduce the energy impacts of the work we're doing. But I'll add with a lot of these data centers, what I'm seeing is an opportunity for regulation. Is I'm not saying we can't have these things, that we shouldn't have these things. I think we really need to demand more from the people building and constructing these things, because there's a lot of issues with noise pollution, actual, air pollution from some of these data centers that are out there that have real negative physical impacts on people. So I think it's important that as we're, quote, improving the quality of life, maybe for workers in certain contexts, we want to make sure that we're thinking about the systems full quality of life for everybody. So if there's some folks in West Memphis right now that are getting gassed by one of Elon's data centers, maybe that's a problem that we need to address. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around advocacy here and expecting better from our leaders because I think there's a lot of innovations and opportunities that we could have with how we build and construct these data centers so that they are, zero energy and that there's sort of closed loop systems in terms of the water that we're not draining down our aquifers so that we can generate more pictures. I think that there's a lot of challenges here that need to be addressed and solved. So I'll say in terms of the development of AI, there's a lot of opportunities for anthropology, but I also think there's a lot of opportunities for anthropologists in this policy space in terms of demanding better and how we implement and build these systems.
I was just going to add, to Jennifer's point from the perspective of an archaeologist, these also have a footprint to them. The energy demand, the water demand, huge factors. But somebody who represents the interests of quite often stakeholders, descendant communities, tribal nations, these have a real physical impact on the landscape and the historic resources that exist everywhere in North America. And so the build out, the rapid build out is also something that, an archaeologist is like myself is looking at, like, are we, moving too quickly? Do we have, the regulations at the federal and the state level to manage this and to, represent the stewardship and preservation of historic resources and the, interests of stakeholder and descendant communities pretty accurately as we move into these, large footprint kinds of systems. I also work in energy. The energy demand is, a big part of the work that I manage with my company and looking at, the real and true needs of energy demand increasing. That also has a physical impact on the landscapes where we live. And absolutely the, current contemporaneous communities being impacted, but also, the finite number of resources that represent our archaeological past. These are non-renewable resources. We do not get any more archaeological sites, from 5,000 years ago being made. We also have to think about, as anthropologists, those resources as well.
Thanks. So I'd like to appreciate all that. Would like to maybe sort of have everybody maybe wrap up with like, little few practical recommendations, and then we can open it up to questions. There's one in the chat that I want to come to, and others obviously feel free to use the Q&A and drop them in. But, again, with this sort of spirit of like preparing for this moment in which we know that employers are asking about this, are expecting to see some of these skills in various ways. We know that there have been, more senior, or late career folks who have been impacted and are pivoting and trying to find new spaces. And we know that there are at least at least in the reporting, there appears to be maybe some pipeline issues. So like with all of like that kind of context, as well as anything that was discussed today, what would you leave folks with as like a closing statement to be thinking about and prepping for, careers in this period of time? And Jennifer, you want to go?
Sure. I would say really lean into the networking piece and look at opportunities to continue learning in different contexts. So one of the things I'll recommend for people who are in school is if you can afford it, I recognize a lot of people have to work through school. So one, remember whatever your service job you might be doing through school, that's skills. That's customer service skills. You're learning how to manage difficult conversations. There's different skills that you're building along the way. So learning how to recognize and track those for yourself, I think is really important. But then also, I always push if you have the time and the energy and the space to find an organization that's doing something that you care about to volunteer with, because one, you'll have a lot more opportunities to take on leadership roles than you would in a paid setting. And also, it's a great way to build networks and get to know people within your community. So, like, I'll add all the work that Suanna and I do with the Anthropology Career Readiness Network, and Matt too, he's our webmaster, is all pro bono. Like, we're volunteering our time and energy for something that we care about. And, down the line, it will probably have positive effects on our career opportunities as well. And we're getting the chance to meet people and talk to people about, issues that are important to them that are forming our own work too as we're going along. So I would say it's really important to recognize that everything you're doing is cumulative. It might feel like you're quote in a dead end job right now, but that some of the skills you're learning in that job might actually help you 5, 10 years down the road.
Thanks. Suanna, want to try?
Sure thing. I absolutely echo everything that Jennifer has just said. Super valuable, that relationship building and that no experience goes to waste. The volunteering piece is huge. And I would add to that, kind of that next level up volunteering is board service inside of organizations. It's not just that, maybe project leadership, it's the actual, stepping up into leadership roles and, learning the realities of those parts of the decision making, the creative process around programming, et cetera, et cetera. Huge, huge plus, particularly if you're early in your career. I would say that as a mother of a college student who has a major that I don't know has 6 or 8 words long in it, and I don't understand what they all mean. I was an anthropology major. I think now, if you are in school, that anthropology and maybe it's the double major, maybe it's something that is kind of sexy like data science. You have an opportunity if you're in school and you have the time and capacity and resources to add to your anthropology in really creative ways. My experience in grad school was interdisciplinary, and I added, geosciences to it. And because of that, I have a specialty where I get to work in parts of the world that other archaeologists do not. And that's been a real game changer for me, that interdisciplinary anthropology and mode. The other piece that I was going to say, and it bounces off of Jennifer's, is the LinkedIn piece, or that sort of digital networking platform. To those of us on this call who may be in mid-career or who are pivoting, if you don't have that LinkedIn platform ready to go, please do try to stand it up. One of the things I learned in science communication was that, LinkedIn platforms are the spaces where people are discovering you. And if you're coming from academia and you have a fabulous academia.edu or ResearchGate profile, the funders and the journalists and the potential partners are not necessarily looking inside of those platforms. They're looking inside of LinkedIn to see who that they can connect with. And so being able to participate with your own authentic voice is a fabulous way to, build the muscle inside of LinkedIn, post at least once a month so the algorithm doesn't forget about you. Thank you, gratitude messages count. Those are really wonderful and important. But experimenting inside of LinkedIn, I know Matt, in previous discussions, we've talked about the importance of a website. I would say that's a bonus if you can do that. But the last thing I'll plug is the National Association for the Practice of Anthropology has a great video series called Snap-a-Shots, and I'll put the link in the chat. And this is, something that you can do on your lunch break, catch a 10-minute video. We have several seasons where we're profiling individual anthropologists who are moving into really interesting applied spaces, and they are talking about the skill sets that they are bringing to them and talking about how they engage with clients and stakeholders and other kinds of audiences and partners. So I recommend that to you as well.
Larry?
Our ethnographies are inherently valuable. Each lays a brick in the wall of human understanding about culture. I really think that an anthropology degree is self-sufficient. You don't need to go out finding more training, adding additional licenses to your anthropology degree. It's already more rigorous, likely, than the training of your colleagues in the future, wherever you might end up. Nonetheless, most organizations don't care about the inherent value of your work. They care about its instrumental value. And so the challenge facing anthropologists, much like other humanists and social scientists, that has not changed at all in the era of AI, is demonstrating the impact derived from your research. How has your work affected change in a process, product, or service? In my experience, that remains the most challenging question for academics to answer. And if you can successfully translate the inherent value of your work into an effective impact for an organization, I think that'll produce the most value in your job search.
Thank you all. And so to open it up to a few questions, um, first one, are there, and you all can see them in the side there, are there ways AI opens newer, better opportunities for anthropologists and their perspectives, particularly relationships with AI that are more about conversation, partnership, teamwork, etc.? Um, any thoughts on that? Anyone?
I was going to say that I think some of these AI tools just sort of very generally um, give you access to much more data than you may have ever dealt with before. And so it's a something like a kid in a candy store feeling, right? There's so much more to explore. There's so many more questions that you can ask. I feel it as I use AI tools as my intern, my thought partner, as I start to craft articles or think about op-eds that I want to write. Um, I think that translating those into opportunities is definitely something that maybe takes, another step or two beyond that. But definitely using, an AI tool if you're in a sort of a startup thinking thought experiment mode for a project that you're trying to work on personally or professionally. Um, taking it to those tools is a great iterative first step. I'm helping a student right now think about a film project, and she's going to be a recent, student to graduate undergraduate degree, and she's using me as a sounding board for a little bit of that thought process. And she has lots of tools and other ways to, consider contacts or storyboarding, things of this nature for a project that she's trying to work on. That's very exciting. And so I think it's what you bring to it in terms of creating those opportunities. It doesn't necessarily passively point you, give you the roadmap in one direction or another.
Thanks. Anyone else want to weigh in or? Oh,
You're
Larry,
muted, Larry.
Thank you. Uh, Microsoft Copilot, Amazon's QuickSight, Claude, those are all programs that I use to store my notes, my data. It's something that I would love to automate, the retrieval of past writing of mine, numbers in spreadsheets. I think find a tool that helps you speed up the process of the really annoying work that's already part of your process. And one of the really annoying things that I used to do was look for the right document to find that note that I wrote down at midnight wanting to massage the prose on page 30 of a manuscript. Use a tool like QuickSight, Claude, or Copilot, or whatever else you could find to speed up that process.
Thanks. There's another question on certifications, especially maybe as it intersects with other fields. Any of you think that's valuable?
I can jump in really quick to add on to the other question about the AI peer-to-peer interaction. I would say it's fine if you want to use this as your work, but don't do it to the exception of actually interacting with your peers. Because I think one of our superpowers of anthropologists in organizations is that we have the ability to build relationships with people across the organization and really understand how the organization functions. So I think that's a really important thing that you can do as an anthropologist that maybe not everybody has the toolkit to do in terms of navigating those relationships. So like coming back to the question on like if you're going to be a resistor, maybe like assess your social capital in the situation too, if you're going to get yourself in trouble. And when it comes to certification, yeah, I've seen an uptick, especially I'm a project manager of the use of AI there. And I think it's really a question of, again, know your audience. Who are you trying to work for? If you want to work for Amazon, yeah, it might be worth it to get the certification. But if you're trying to work for, the Nature Conservancy, I don't know if they're going to be wowed by that. So it's really thinking about when you're spending the time and the energy and the money to get certifications that they're a fit for the work you want to do. And that's again where those networking informational interviews come in, is talking to people working in the spaces that you want to be in about what skills, what certifications, what things are employers in their space looking for. I think it's really important to think about where is it relevant. And I'll add for non for project management, number one reason projects fail is issues of communication, which I don't know if AI is going to solve for.
Anyone else? Thoughts on that? Intersections?
I'll just say that I'm uh, becoming a fan of some of those certification processes. I completely agree with Jennifer on the relevancy piece. They're not Pokemon cards. Do not collect all. You be thoughtful about what they are. That being said, as I watch this, college student and the high school student behind her start to think about what careers look like in this day and age, I think there are certain, groups of students are tuned to what's going to get me past the bot when I start that process of applying to a job. And to some degree, it's a little uncertain. We're still not clear on whether, these keyword searches that the applicant tracking systems do, if it does, change the outcome and get you that phone call with the human being on the other side. In some cases, I think it does. In some cases, I don't think it does. But that, using that human discernment, using that, thoughtful process about your path. Does it get you further along your path? Is it worth your time and money? I will say that where I live in Greater Boston, the state of Massachusetts has now kind of been in a sort of a demonstration mode, and our governor has engaged with Google and through Coursera so that all of the residents of Massachusetts will have access to that first pass AI class that Coursera and Google have launched. I think it's about 8 hours for a baseline training. And the state of Massachusetts will be unrolling this new program. As a resident of Massachusetts, we will all be able to access and take this 8 hour class because, the posture is this is of value. So look for things of that nature where you are living. Are there, community access resources, programs, connections that you can make? Certainly NAPA, AAA, SfAA, these organizations are engaged in the conversation about, is credentialing necessary? Is it worthwhile? How can we make it work? How can we make it sustainable? Those are very present conversations that we're having. I carry RPA, Registered Professional Archaeologist, so I have a credential that I use, and that's recognized inside of my space, and it's also recognized as a risk mitigator for the consulting space, saying that I've met, some minimum requirements, and that my employer and the clients of my employer have some reassurance that I bring certain skills and value to the table.
Thanks. And Larry, you're on mute too.
We're talking about licenses.
Do you see any value in certifications in AI, or how like something like that might intersect with anything else, like say AI for UX or something of that nature?
No. I,
Okay,
if,
then
if you
I'll
have if you have a PhD in anthropology, trying to add on licenses, I don't see the value in that.
so I'm going to ask one last question, but I'm not going to ask it the way it was posted. But it's something we all hear a lot. And, it goes something to the effect of more or less, how do you feel working outside of academia and are you selling out? And it's, obviously broader than AI, but, you know, who wants to take a crack at that one?
Oh, if you get a job with a rich patron's name on it, say as the chair in anthropology at Princeton, you should absolutely take that job. That's better than anything that you will find in the business world. The reason why most of us are attending this session, however, is that you're not going to get that job. I didn't get that job. And the business world is a pretty good second to that.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, I think Suanna, but I'll jump in. Yeah, I think the question is, only you can know what's best for you in terms of your values, what's important to you, what you can live with, what helps you sleep at night. I worked in philanthropy for 5 years, which there's a lot of ethical questions and challenging things to navigate there. Yeah, with a rich guy's name on the building. And now I'm definitely more of an advocacy activist space, which does feel much more comfortable for me. But I would say everything I learned along the way, working in corporate settings, in philanthropy settings, is making me better at my job here at the end. So I would say you can also go into spaces to learn how they function, and maybe you want to help tear them down at some point. But it's like really thinking about, yeah, like this adds up, and if you have to take a job to be able to pay your bills and live, that's okay. Like we're all having to navigate this capitalist world, and it's tough, and sometimes we have to do stuff we don't like. But it's really about thinking about ways to get yourself in a position so that you can do something that feels much more in continuity with your own values and what you enjoy doing too. I think it's important to think about what do you value and what brings you joy. I think finding ways to find that in your work is important.
I was just going to say that when I defended my dissertation, four of the five committee members basically said, so you have this degree in archaeology and you did this interdisciplinary stuff in geosciences. I guess that means you're going to go forth and write everybody's chapter 2 environmental context for, a technical report. And it was my committee's way of messaging, we're not going to be helping you get that academic job, which was, kind of a brick wall I didn't anticipate in the defense. But the one member of the committee who was an applied person, who had worked in federal spaces as an applied researcher, you know, took the answer to that question before I could get the answer out and said, Suanna's going to do what Suanna needs to do to, feed and clothe and shelter her family, to, make her own dreams come true professionally, and to do some amazing things wherever she is going to find the time and capacity to do them. And it was such a refreshing reminder in that moment of defending this document, this piece of work, that we are in charge. We can bet on ourselves with the skill sets that we have, that anthropology has given us as our operating system, and we can take those out into the world in, singular, distinctive, and impactful ways. So I've never doubted the value of the anthropology side of my degree and training, but I have challenged myself and been challenged at time along the messy path that is career to reposition, rethink, redeploy those skills in ways that do meet, the basic life goals and the extras that I'm kind of going after. So I'd encourage folks to bet on themselves, bet on the value of their anthropology degree, and see where it takes you.
Okay, thank you all. So I appreciate all the varying perspectives. Again, today was very much about thinking broadly on the topic and not so like, again, not about how do you build this stuff like we did, previously in prior to the annual meeting. This was, very much meant to be open-ended. The next session will be roughly a month from now, tentatively May 15th, but we'll just need to make sure that all calendars work out. It will be looking more at the impacts on the educational sector, teaching, what does it mean? What does it mean to teach today? Is anything changing or not? Kind of like today, right? We'll have varying viewpoints. Some will make the argument probably it's changing, others will not. Some may make that it's good, some may make that it's bad, right? And the point here is to sort of open up the space like we did today to hear from folks in that, in varying perspectives, so you all have something to think about. So that will be posted on LinkedIn and probably other channels from the Society for Applied Anthropology. I'll share it, others will share it. So keep an eye out for that, and we welcome you back. And I thank everybody today, Larry, Jennifer, Suanna, thank you all for your time. Very much appreciated, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.